Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Thursday afternoon. The commitment sweatshirt comes back on again for Hugh Freeze, the Auburn Tigers. Former Wake Forest wide receiver Horatio Fields committing to this Auburn program. This is one of the more fascinating wide receivers in the transfer portal. A guy that if you just click on or turn on the most popular college football game every single Saturday, you're probably not too familiar with what Horatio Fields brings to the table. I think there's a reason we're talking about the number 10 wide receiver in the transfer portal, top 30 prospect overall in the portal. This kid can play. And as a Wake Forest alum, I'll turn on a Wake Forest football game from time to time, as painful as it can be. Look, there ain't many bright spots on Wake Forest. If there was a bright spot, it would be wide receiver Horatio Fields. And what I love most about Horatio Fields is this kid is just getting better as a football player. He comes in as a low 3-star recruit, redshirts his freshman year, gets on the football field a little bit in 2023, and then in 2024, you can tell he's starting to put it together. And so the box score, his stats from 2024, 39 catches, 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, they're not going to jump off the page at you, but I think there's a reason that a service like 24/7 Sports is putting him as a top 10 wide receiver in this transfer portal class, and why there are so many Power 4 programs going after this kid. Yeah, I think he's getting better as a football player, and his best football is kind of in front of him. And if you're Hugh Freeze in Auburn, this one kind of makes sense. And I don't think they're done with the wide receivers in the transfer portal. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. This wide receiver room for Auburn is going to be damn good. You're looking at Cam Coleman, who I think will be one of the best wide receivers in the country, which I don't think is a crazy thing to say. We kind of saw the glimpses of it in 2024. Perry Thompson, I expect to see a big step from him. Malcolm Simmons might be the most underrated wide receiver on this Auburn football team. It's a good wide receiver room that became a little bit thin. When you're so good with young talent in the wide receiver room, sometimes you squeeze out some of your depth pieces, which is what happened. And Auburn's trying to not only replace the numbers, but probably get a little bit more experienced as well. For as good as these wide receivers are that we just talked about, they're only going into their second year of college football. Injecting a guy that's going into year 4 like Horatio Fields, a guy that's done it pretty consistently in 2024, this makes a little bit of sense too. And again, I don't think Auburn's done. I want to talk a little bit more about Horatio Fields, talk about what this Auburn wide receiver room is going to look like. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Auburn fans, it's been really fun talking about these commitments over the last couple of weeks. Y'all continue to show a ton of support to the boys, so we can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into Horatio Fields. And again, what I love most about this kid is the smoothness in terms of how he plays and run his routes for someone who's 6'3", 205. It's really impressive. Normally when you're talking about a 6'3", 205 wide receiver, you're just talking about a vertical deep threat. A guy that just, I'm big, fast, I'm going to work vertically down the field. There's a lot more to Horatio Fields' game. And although he's not a yards after the catch machine, he's a guy that can separate. He's a guy that can move the chains on third downs. And you start looking at where he fits in to this Auburn wide receiver room, you make no mistake about it. Cam Coleman on the boundary is going to be that go-to guy. And then you look on the other boundary and talk about, Perry Thompson, a guy that he's going to be very good. It's just a matter of when. And I think you look at that it's going to be Horatio Fields and Perry Thompson. I wouldn't say battling it out because there's going to be plenty of opportunities for both of these wide receivers, but it's going to be a little bit of an iron sharpens iron situation for Perry Thompson and Horatio Fields. And you're kind of balancing Perry Thompson, who's super, super talented, with the wide receiver that maybe doesn't have all the physical traits that Perry Thompson has, but is a little bit farther on with his development. Then you look into the slot, talk about a guy like Malcolm Simmons. That 4 wide receiver group, not even talking about guys like Bryce Kane, you really like. And then if you're going to put this wide receiver room over the top, then you start talking about a guy in Eric Singleton Jr., where it sounds like it's picking up, right? I mean, this was a guy that he's the number 3 overall prospect in the portal. Pretty much every program in the country wants him. It sounds like Auburn might be the team to beat. And you look at Eric Singleton, why I love the fit here is, one, he's just a damn good football player. More importantly, you can do so many different things with Eric Singleton. He can win vertically down the field. He can be a guy that operates after the catch. You can give him some end arounds. Whether it's creating separation down the field, whether it's with the football in his hands, there's not many ways Eric Singleton can't contribute to this Auburn offense. And that's why I think he's so attractive in the portals. It doesn't really matter what kind of wide receiver room you have because of how dynamic and how many different ways that Eric Singleton can get involved. Even if you have a loaded wide receiver room like Auburn does, it's easy to find ways to get Eric Singleton involved in the offense. And then you start talking about Eric Singleton, Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Horatio Fields, Malcolm Simmons. You look up and say this wide receiver room might be one of the best in the country, which is a far cry from back in 2023 when Hugh Freeze took this thing over. It might have been the worst wide receiver room in the SEC, quite frankly. And then it gets better in 2024, and it sounds like it's going to get even better going into 2025. That's a really good trend for Auburn. And the last thing I'll say is they're building around Jackson Arnold. And I know the Auburn fan base is kind of, maybe you'll say split in terms of how you view Jackson Arnold. I think there's a segment of Auburn's fans that are like, hey, the upside's big time. And then I think there's another segment where it's like, all right, well, this is another unproven quarterback that's been kind of rocky his first 2 years. And I totally understand both sides. The way I probably look at it is I think too many head coaches and programs don't bet enough on upside and don't take enough risks, specifically at the quarterback spot. Auburn could have grabbed the guy like Miller Moss and probably won 8 games, but I don't know if Miller Moss is going to be a guy that allows you to compete for an SEC championship. Although Miller Moss might have the higher floor and be the safer option, I think there's a reason Hugh Freeze went after a guy like Jackson Arnold. Although he's not a proven commodity at the college football level yet, we all know how talented Jackson Arnold is. And so you're bringing a guy like Jackson Arnold who has the ceiling to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Make no mistake about it. Now it's, hey, how many pieces around him can we fill this offense up and give him a really good opportunity to be successful? Because that's what you really don't know about Jackson Arnold is at Oklahoma, disaster offensive line, disaster pass catcher room. Jackson Arnold didn't really get a fair shake as a second-year quarterback. Now he's coming to Auburn, and they've done phenomenal work on the offensive line. Guys like Xavier Chaplin and Mason Murphy, they've done a really good job creating some wide receivers that can be explosive around him. I look at Jackson Arnold and his opportunity at Auburn, and you guys have already heard me say this. It feels like the Bo Nix reverse. Bo Nix was on Auburn, talented quarterback. We all knew how talented he was. We saw the flashes of Bo Nix's talent, but the offense around him was so bad that he couldn't really overcome it. He goes to Oregon. They put a good offense around him, and all of a sudden he's a Heisman Trophy caliber guy. You're hoping you can get the same thing from Jackson Arnold. We know this kid has the talent, and then Hugh Freeze is pushing all his chips into the middle to make sure the situation that Jackson Arnold is walking into is as good as it can be for this Auburn offense. We'll see if they can land Eric Singleton. I mean, obviously, you really want him on the team. Whether they do or don't, I look at this Auburn wide receiver room and say it's going to be damn good. In 2025, it's just going to be even better if you get a guy like Eric Singleton. We'll pause it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.